Good evening. Get comfortable wherever you are. Let the pillow take the weight of your head, and let your shoulders come down from wherever they've been holding themselves all day. Tonight, you're going to take a position. Not a fictional one, exactly. A real one, held by real women in real houses across England for the better part of 2 centuries, and held with a competence that almost nobody in those houses ever said out loud. You are going to be given a set of keys, and you are going to be given authority over a great many people and a great deal of money. And you are going to be told in 1,000 small ways that none of it counts as work. Before we begin, let me clear something out of the way, because it will get in the way otherwise. You have almost certainly met a Victorian housekeeper before. She turns up in novels and in films, and she is nearly always the same woman. A tall figure in black at the top of a staircase, hands folded, disapproving of everything, a little sinister, possibly hiding something. She glides. She appears at doorways without being heard. She dislikes the young mistress on sight, and she keeps a bunch of keys at her waist that jangle whenever the plot requires a sound. Set that woman aside. She has almost nothing to do with the person you are about to become. And set aside the other picture too, the softer one, where the housekeeper is a warm and rounded body in an apron who bakes things and calls everyone dear. That's the cook, mostly, and even the cook was less cozy than the picture suggests. The housekeeper wore black because black was the uniform of rank among servants, the same way a bank manager wore black. She was not sinister, and she was not cozy. She was, in almost every practical sense, the chief operating officer of a large residential business that also happened to be somebody's home. Here is what she actually was, and this is the promise of tonight. She was the one person in the house who could open every locked door. Not the master, not the mistress. Her. The storeroom, the linen press, the china closet, the still room, the plate safe, the door at the top of the cellar stair. Every one of those doors had a lock, and every one of those locks had a key, and all of those keys hung from her waist or sat in a basket she carried from room to room. She controlled access to the sugar and the tea and the candles and the soap. She knew to the ounce what the household had consumed that week, because she had weighed it out with her own hands and written it down in a book that the master of the house would read on a Saturday morning. She hired and dismissed the women who worked under her. She kept the accounts. She negotiated with tradesmen. She decided, in effect, what the family would eat, though she was always careful to present that decision as a question. And she did all of it while being addressed by a title she had no legal right to, in a house she would never own, for a wage that a clerk in a shipping office would have thought insulting. So the locked doors are the thread we're going to follow tonight. What was behind them? Why it was worth locking? And what it meant that one woman, and only one woman, held the means to open them all. If you find this sort of thing settles your mind at the end of a long day, the subscribe button helps more than you'd think. And if you feel like it, leave a comment telling me where you are and what the time is where you're listening. I like reading them. There's something companionable about knowing that somebody in a completely different part of the world has the same lamp on, at the same odd hour. Now, let the room go soft, and let the year fall away. It is 1878. The house stands about 4 miles outside Bath, at the end of a gravel drive with limes planted along it, and it has been in the same family since the 1740s. It is not the grandest house in the county, and everyone concerned is quietly aware of that. There are 22 rooms above stairs, if you count the 2 that nobody has properly used since the old master died. There is a family of 5. There are 11 indoor servants and 4 out. And there is you. It is not yet 5 in the morning. You are awake because you are always awake at this hour, and have been for so many years, that your body no longer requires a reason. The room is cold in the particular way that a stone house is cold in early spring, which is to say, the cold seems to come out of the walls rather than in through the window. You lie still for a moment, from somewhere below and behind you, in the direction of the kitchen passage. There is the scrape of a shovel in a coal scuttle, which means the scullery maid is up, which means the world is proceeding as it should. The smell of the house at this hour is the smell you know better than any other. Cold coal ash, beeswax and turpentine from the polish. A faint sourness of damp from the passage wall that no amount of attention has ever entirely cured. And underneath all of it, threaded through everything, the smell of the storeroom, which is sugar and dried fruit and soap and candle tallow all mixed together, and which has got into your clothes so thoroughly over the years that you no longer notice it except when you have been away. You are 41 years old. You are addressed by everyone in this house, from the master downward, as Mrs. You have never been married. You never will be. The courtesy title is simply attached to the office, in the way that a rank is attached to a uniform. And it was given to you the day you were promoted, and will be taken back on the day you leave. It is meant to convey seniority, and it does. It also conveys something else, if you sit with it long enough, which is that the woman in this post is expected to be finished with one kind of life before she begins this one. Your room is on the ground floor, near the storeroom and the still room, and this is itself a statement of rank. The housemaids sleep 3 flights up under the roof, 2 to a bed, in rooms that are freezing in February and unbearable in July. You have a room to yourself. You have a small sitting room adjoining it, with a fire that is laid for you each morning by somebody else, and a chair with arms, and a table you use for the accounts, and a shelf of books that are yours and not the family's. No other woman in this house has a fire laid for her. That single fact tells you almost everything about where you stand. Your wage is £45 a year, paid quarterly. On top of that, you receive an allowance of tea and sugar, which is worth real money, and which we will return to later tonight, because the reason it is given as an allowance, rather than as cash, is one of the most revealing details in the whole arrangement. You receive beer money. You have the use of a maid of your own, the still room maid, who is 15 and slow and improving, and you have, in the corner of your sitting room, a locked box containing money that belongs to the household and is your responsibility, which is a form of trust so complete that it is almost never spoken about directly. Now, before you rise, let me correct the thing that most people get wrong. It is the whole reason we're here tonight. From above stairs, this house appears to run itself. That is not a figure of speech. It is the actual design intent. When the family comes down in the morning, The fires in the breakfast room and the morning room have been lit for an hour and are drawing well. The grates were cleaned before they were lit. The hearths were swept, the fenders polished, the coal carried up from the cellar in scuttles that were themselves cleaned before they were filled. The breakfast dishes are hot because somebody heated them. The rooms are warm, and the flowers were changed, and the newspaper was ironed to set the ink so it wouldn't come off on the master's fingers. Nobody upstairs sees any of this happen. It is not that they are being cruel about it. It is that the entire architecture of the house, physically and socially, has been built to keep them from seeing it. The back stairs exist so that a housemaid carrying a full slop pail never crosses the path of a family member on the main staircase. The green baize door exists to keep the smell of cooking and the sound of 11 people working on the correct side of the house. Servants are trained to leave a room when a family member enters it, or to turn and face the wall, depending on the household. The result is a domestic fiction of extraordinary power. The fiction is that comfort is a natural condition of a house like this, that warmth simply occurs, that food appears, and linen is white, and silver shines, and none of it required anyone to get up at 4:30 and carry 40 pounds of coal up 3 flights in the dark. And here is the point. The labor of maintaining that fiction is enormous, and somebody has to organize it. Somebody has to know how much soap the house consumes in a month and order it before it runs out. Somebody has to know which housemaid can be trusted with the good glass. Somebody has to decide whether the sheets in the second-best bedroom have another season in them, or whether they should be cut down for the servants' beds now. Somebody has to hold that entire system in her head every day and produce it seamlessly, and be able to account for every penny of it on Saturday. That somebody is you, and the better you do it, the less anybody notices that you are doing anything at all. So, push back the blankets. The floor is very cold. There's a candle on the table beside you and a box of matches, and the day is going to begin whether or not you are ready for it. Let us start with the keys. The match takes on the second strike. The candle is tallow, not wax, because wax is for upstairs, and you have never once been tempted to confuse the two, and the light it gives is small and yellow, and smells faintly of mutton fat. It shows you the room in pieces, the corner of the washstand, the edge of the chest, the dark shape of your gown hanging on the back of the door where you left it at 11 o'clock last night. It is the 9th of October, 1878. The house stands about 4 miles outside Bath, on the southern slope. A square grey stone building with a gravel sweep in front of it, and a kitchen garden behind that runs down toward a stream you can hear on wet nights. 16 bedrooms, 11 indoor servants, more when the family entertains. The family itself consists of the master, who has land and a share in a bank, and sits on 2 boards, the mistress, 3 daughters, and a son at school, and an aunt who lives on the 2nd floor, and takes her breakfast in her room. The air in your room is cold, in the specific way that stone houses are cold in October, which is to say it has not yet gone properly cold. It has simply stopped pretending to be warm. You can smell coal dust from the passage, and under it beeswax, because the hall floor was done yesterday afternoon, and the smell of beeswax gets into everything, and stays for 2 days. You are 41 years old. You are addressed as Mrs. by everybody, including the mistress, including the master, on the rare occasions when he addresses you at all. You have never been married. You have never been engaged. The title is not a lie exactly. It is a rank, in the way that a sergeant is called sergeant. Somewhere along the line, the household world decided that a woman who runs a large establishment should be given the courtesy of a married woman's name, whatever her actual situation, and the custom stuck so firmly that a young housekeeper in her 20s will be called Mrs. by servants twice her age. The cook is Mrs. as well, for the same reason. Everybody below you is called by a first name or a surname, plain. The housemaids are called by whatever names the mistress finds convenient, which sometimes means a girl christened one thing answers to another for as long as she stays in the house. So you are Mrs., and you have been Mrs. for 11 years now, in 3 different houses. And it has been so long since anyone used your Christian name aloud that hearing it would startle you. Here is the first thing that separates you from every other woman working under this roof. You have a room of your own, not a shared attic under the slates, where 2 or 3 housemaids sleep in one iron bed with their boxes at the foot of it, and wash in cold water from a jug. Not a truckle bed in the passage outside the nursery. A room on the ground floor, at the back of the house, on the passage that runs between the kitchen wing and the main stair. It has a proper window looking out at the wall of the kitchen garden. It has a bed you do not share. It has a chest, a washstand, a chair, a strip of carpet, and a small-looking glass. And through the door beside it, you have a sitting room. This is the thing. This is the fact that tells you where you stand in the world. Your sitting room is not large. It has 2 upright chairs and 1 armchair with a worn arm, a table with a cloth on it, a bookcase with perhaps 30 volumes in it, a fireplace, and a clock. The clock is your own, bought second-hand in Bristol 9 years ago. And the fire in that grate is laid for you by somebody else before you come to it in the evening. A housemaid brings the coal. A housemaid clears the ash. You take your tea in that room, sitting down in a chair with arms, with a fire, alone or with the cook. And this is a thing that no housemaid in England does, and no laundry-maid does, and no kitchen-maid does, and every one of them knows it. The room has another use. It is where you interview a girl who wants a place. It is where you speak to a servant who has been careless, with the door shut, so that the correction happens once in private, rather than in front of 8 people at the servants' hall table. It is where the tradesmen's books are kept, and where the account is written up. It is, in every practical sense, an office, and the fact that the household calls it a sitting room does not change what happens in it. Now the money, because the money is where the shape of a life becomes clear. Your wage is £45 a year, paid quarterly. That is a little above the middle of the range for a housekeeper in a good country house of this size in the late 1870s. A housekeeper in a very grand establishment with 30 or 40 servants under her might have 60 or 70. In a smaller house, where the cooking and the keys and the housekeeping all fall on one woman, it might be 25 or 30, and the work would be worse. Set that beside the others in the passage. The scullery maid in this house has £8 a year. The under housemaid has 14. The head housemaid has 22. The lady's maid, who is quick with a needle and speaks a little French and does hair, has 30. The cook has 50, which is more than you. And there is no resentment in this, because a really good cook is harder to replace than a really good housekeeper. And everybody understands the market. The butler has 60, and the young footman, who was hired for his height and the shape of his calf as much as anything else, has 28 and free livery. Against those numbers, 45 is a serious income for a woman without property, but the wage is only part of it. You also have what the trade calls perquisites, and they are worth counting. You have your tea and sugar found, which sounds small and is not, because tea in this decade runs somewhere between 2 shillings and 3 and 6pence a pound, depending on the grade. And a woman who drinks tea properly gets through a good deal of it. You have beer money, which is 1 shilling a week paid, instead of the old custom of small beer with meals. You have your candles. You have your board, all of it, every meal, every day, at a table that eats extremely well by the standards of any working household in England, because the servants' hall in a house like this eats the joint that came off the family's table on Monday, and a great deal else besides. And you have a servant of your own. Not formally, not in any written agreement, but the still room maid is under your hand, and the youngest housemaid can be sent for. And in practice a woman brings you hot water in the morning, and takes away your slops, and makes your fire, and you have not carried a coal scuttle up a stair in a decade. Put all of that together, and the £45 is not really £45. It is £45 with nothing to spend it on, but clothes, a Christmas box for your sister's children, the doctor when you need him, and whatever you can put by. A careful housekeeper saves most of her wage. A careful housekeeper who works 30 years and keeps her health can retire with £300 or £400 and take a cottage or a share in a small lodging house. A careless one, or an unlucky one, retires with nothing at all. Hold that thought. We will come back to it at the end of the day, when the house is dark. Because there is a myth about houses like this, and it needs correcting now rather than later, while you are still standing in your cold room with a candle in your hand. The myth is that the mistress runs the household. She does not. She does not order the groceries or check them against the bill. She does not know what a pound of moist sugar costs this month as against last month. She does not know how many pairs of sheets the house owns, or which of them are past mending, or that the linen in the blue bedroom was turned sides to middle 2 years ago, and will not survive another winter. She does not know that the third housemaid has been slow at the grates since her mother was taken ill. And she does not know that you have quietly shifted that girl's work for a fortnight, so that nobody notices and nobody has to be dismissed. The mistress chooses. She chooses between the 2 dinners you propose. She chooses the date of the house party. She chooses the color of the new drawing-room curtains. And every one of those choices arrives at her already narrowed, already costed, already made possible or impossible by somebody who spent the morning working out what the house could carry. The great social arrangement of this era holds that a lady of her class does no work. She must not appear to labor or calculate or bargain or count. That fiction is worth a great deal to her family, and it is maintained at considerable expense. And the expense is paid by you, because somebody has to actually do the counting, and the bargaining, and the reckoning of what a household of 19 people can eat and burn and wear in a week without the master's face going hard on Saturday when he looks at the book. So the honest description of your position is this: you are the working manager of a substantial enterprise. You control an annual spend that runs into several £100s. You direct the labor of 6 or 7 women. You hold responsibility for property worth more than you will earn in your lifetime, and you are personally answerable for all of it. And you will never be called anything but a servant. The candle has burned down about 1/4 of an inch while you have been standing there thinking none of this, because you have known it for 11 years, and it does not require thinking about at 5:30 in the morning. You put your feet into your slippers. You pour cold water into the basin. And then you go to the chest, and you open the top drawer, and you take out the thing that makes you what you are in this house. It is a ring of keys, and it is heavier than you expect it to be even now, after 11 years of lifting it every morning of your working life. But you do not put it on yet. Dressing comes first, and dressing in your position is a matter of some care. You are not a housemaid who may go about her early work in print cotton and an apron and change before the family is awake. You are visible from the moment you leave your room. The mistress may send for you at any hour. A tradesman may come to the back door at 7 and must find someone who looks like authority standing behind it. So you dress once, properly, and you stay dressed. The gown is black, not silk, which would be presumptuous, and not the coarse stuff a kitchen maid wears, which would be beneath your rank. It is a good black wool, well cut, made by a dressmaker in the town 2 winters ago, and altered since, because a gown at that price is expected to last. The collar is white linen, and it is fresh this morning, because a collar that is not fresh says something about you that you cannot afford to have said. The cuffs are white too. Your hair goes up and back and is not fashionable, because fashion in a woman of your position reads as a kind of ambition, and ambition in a servant is not admired. You look, when you are finished, precisely like what you are. A woman of some standing, who is nonetheless in somebody's employ. Every element of that costume is doing work. The black says gravity and responsibility. The white linen says cleanliness, which is the whole moral currency of the household you manage. The absence of ornament says that you are not competing with anyone upstairs, and everyone concerned understands that this is important. And then the keys. They hang from a chatelaine, a hooked clasp of steel that fixes at your waistband, though in many houses of this kind, the housekeeper simply carries a basket, a small covered thing lined with cloth, so the metal does not knock and clatter through the passages. You use the chatelaine indoors and the basket when you go out to the yard buildings, because 30-odd keys of assorted sizes swinging loose against your hip through a whole day is a thing you tried in your first year and abandoned in your second. 30-odd keys. Let us go through what they actually open, because the list is the map of your authority, and nothing else describes the shape of your day so exactly. The largest is the storeroom. which you will unlock in less than an hour, and which holds every consumable in the house that has value and will keep. The still room, where the preserving is done, and its cupboard, which is a separate key. The china closet, holding the dinner services, the dessert service, the everyday wear, the glass. The linen press, which is really 3 presses in 2 rooms, sheets in one, table linen in another, and a third for the nursery things that are washed separately. The plate safe, or rather the housekeeper's half of the arrangement by which the plate is secured. And we will come back to that, because it is the most delicate line in the whole house. The wine cellar door, though not importantly, the inner bins. The linen closet on the bedroom floor. The medicine cupboard. The soap and candle store. The tea caddy itself, which locks, and which is a small object that will tell you a great deal about the century if you look at it long enough. There are keys to the back door, and the yard door, and the door from the kitchen passage to the garden. There are keys to 2 rooms currently shut up because the family does not use them, and shut rooms must not be casually entered. There is a key to your own sitting room, and one to the drawer in your own desk, where the account books live between reckonings. And that one is the smallest on the ring, and you could not lose it without losing your position. This is worth slowing down for, because the modern instinct is to look at a house where the sugar is locked away from the servants and read it as suspicion. It is not, mostly. Or rather, suspicion is not the useful word for what is going on. Consider the actual problem. You are running an establishment of 19 people, of whom 11 are paid staff and 8 are family and guests. That establishment consumes, in a week, something on the order of 30 pounds of sugar, 20 pounds of butter, a great deal of tea, flour by the sack, candles by the dozen, soap, blacking, starch, soda, vinegar, spices that come from the other side of the world and cost accordingly. The master reviews the household accounts. He expects the money spent to correspond to the goods consumed, and he expects both figures to be defensible. Now, if the storeroom stood open, and any of 11 people could take a handful of currants or a wedge of sugar loaf whenever they passed the door, none of them dishonest, all of them simply human, the arithmetic would come apart within a month. Not because anyone stole, but because nobody could say where anything went. The lock is not primarily a defense against theft. It is the mechanism that makes the accounting possible. Every ounce that leaves the shelf leaves through your hand and goes into your book. And because of that, at the end of the quarter, there is a number that can be checked against another number. That is what the keys are. They are not a statement about the honesty of your housemaids. They are the physical form of a bookkeeping system in a period before there was any other way to do it. There is a second thing going on, though, and it would be dishonest to leave it out. The keys are also status. The woman who holds them is the woman who cannot be dismissed casually, because she is the only person who knows where anything is and what condition it is in. When a housekeeper leaves a place, she hands over her keys formally, and the incoming woman counts the stores against the book. And that handover is a serious business that can take 2 days. The keys are the office. To hold them is to be the housekeeper. There are households where a housekeeper who has fallen out of favor is asked for her keys before she is told anything else, and every servant in the passage understands what has happened the moment they see the basket go up the stairs. And now, the fact that explains the entire architecture of this house, which is that the mistress holds no keys at all. She has never opened the storeroom. She could not tell you, without asking, how much sugar is in it. If she wanted a jar of last summer's damson preserve, she would ring, and someone would come, and that someone would find you, and you would fetch it. In a smaller establishment, in a house with 2 servants and an income of £400 a year, the mistress carries the keys herself and does the weighing out with her own hands, and there is no shame in it, and Mrs. Beeton's book is written substantially for her. But in a house of this size, keys at the mistress's waist would be a kind of confession. It would say that the family cannot afford a woman to do it. So the keys come down. They come down to you, along with the counting and the reckoning and the responsibility. And what stays upstairs is the choosing. She chooses. New provision. She decides that there will be a house party in 3 weeks. You work out whether there are 8 sets of sheets fit to put on 8 beds, and what it will cost to make good the shortfall. Her authority is real, and it is final. But it operates on a set of options that you have already assembled, priced, and quietly limited. And this is a distinction that will run through every hour of the day ahead of you. The clasp closes at your waist. The weight settles and shifts and finds the place on your hip, where it has worn a faint shine into the wool of every black gown you have owned since you were 30. You take the candle. You do not need it for the passage, which you could walk in complete darkness, but you will need it in the storeroom, where there is one small high window facing north, and it will be another hour before that window is worth anything. The back stairs are stone for the first flight, and then wood. They are steep and narrow and unpolished, because nobody who matters is meant to see them. And the whole house is arranged so that the family need never encounter the machinery that keeps them warm and fed. You go down with one hand on the rail, and the keys make their sound, and the sound goes ahead of you down the stairwell. That sound is the reason the passage below is already quieter than it was 30 seconds ago, because a house like this wakes in layers, and the layer that wakes first is the scullery maid, who is 15 and has been up since 5 lighting the kitchen range, and the kitchen maid behind her, and the 2 younger housemaids who are at this moment carrying coal, scuttles up the back stairs on the other side of the house. They know the sound of your keys, the way a village knows the sound of its own church bell. There is a certain amount of talking that stops when you come along the passage, and there always has been, and you stopped minding it about 9 years ago. At the bottom of the stairs, the air changes. It is warmer, and it smells of coal smoke and wet stone and the beginnings of bacon. And somewhere off to the left, a kettle is starting to make the noise a kettle makes before it makes the other noise. The servants' hall door is open. The lamp is lit in there. Somebody has laid the long table, and at the far end of the passage, in the dark, is a door with a keyhole in it that has been waiting for you since 10 o'clock last night. The storeroom door is at the end of the passage, past the boot room and past the lamp room, and it is the only door down here that is never left standing open. You walk to it in the near dark because the passage lamp is at the other end, and you do not need the light. Your hand finds the keyhole before your eye does. The key for it is the third on the ring, a heavy one, older than the lock it turns, and it goes in with a small resistance and then gives. The bolt slides back with a sound like a knuckle cracking. You push the door with your shoulder because it has swollen in the frame every winter since the house was built, and it opens onto cold and sugar and pepper and the particular dry smell of a room where nothing is allowed to be damp. You light the candle on the shelf inside the door. The room comes up out of the dark in pieces. Shelves on 3 walls, floor to ceiling, deal boards scrubbed pale. On the top shelf, out of casual reach, the sugar loaves in their blue paper, cones of it, 9 of them at the moment, each one about 14 pounds in weight and hard as masonry. Below those, the tea canisters, 4 of them, japanned tin with the lids that fit properly, which is the whole reason they cost what they cost. Coffee in a separate canister, because coffee takes the smell of anything near it. Then the jars, in a row you arranged yourself, and have never let anyone rearrange. Rice, sago, tapioca, split peas, barley, currants, raisins, candied peel in the dark green jar because the light spoils it. The far wall is the plainer goods. Yellow soap in bars stacked like bricks. Candles, both the tallow for below stairs and the wax for above, which are kept apart from each other for reasons that are about accounting rather than about smell. Blacking for the grates. Beeswax and turpentine in the corked bottle. Starch, blue for the laundry. A stone jar of vinegar, a stone jar of oil, both with their own shallow tray beneath, in case of a slow leak, because you learned about slow leaks in your second year, and have never learned about them again. And in the middle of the room, under the window that is too high and too small to climb through, the table. The scales stand on it. The weights sit beside the scales in their nested set, from a 1/4 ounce up to 4 pounds, brass, and you polish them yourself, and nobody else touches them. This is where the day actually begins. You take down the tea canister first, because tea is the thing that everyone in the house, upstairs and down, is waiting on. The lid comes off. The smell that comes up is dry and faintly smoky, and worth, ounce for ounce, more than the candle you are reading by. You weigh out the day's issue. Not a generous amount, not a mean one. An amount. The scoop goes in, the leaf goes onto the brass pan, the weights go on the other side, and the beam settles, and you tip the leaf into the smaller canister that goes up to the kitchen and comes back empty. Then sugar, broken from a loaf with the nippers, and the broken sugar weighed the same way. Then rice for the pudding. Then currants, counted out by weight and not by handful, because a handful is a different size on every hand in this house. Here is the thing that people misunderstand about this room, and it is worth slowing down for, because the misunderstanding has followed the Victorian housekeeper into every picture ever painted of her. The lock is not there because you believe the kitchen maid is a thief. In 11 years, you have dismissed exactly one person for taking things, and that was a man. And it was not from this room. The lock is there because a household of this size consumes an astonishing quantity of very expensive goods, and the only way anyone will ever know how much, or where it went, or whether the amount is rising, is if every ounce, passes through one pair of hands and gets written down on its way past. Unlocked shelves do not produce dishonesty. They produce ignorance. A house with unlocked shelves cannot answer the question of what it spends, and a house that cannot answer that question is a house heading toward an unpleasant conversation with a bank. So the lock is an instrument of arithmetic. It is not an accusation. And the difference between a housekeeper who understands that and one who does not is the difference between a house where the maids resent you quietly for years and a house where they simply accept, the way you accepted at 19, that this is how the machinery works. Consider what is on these shelves in terms of money, because the numbers explain the door. Tea, in this year, runs somewhere between 2 shillings and 4 shillings a pound, depending on the quality. And the household drinks the better sort upstairs and a plainer sort below. And even the plainer sort is not cheap. A pound of tea at 3 shillings costs more than a housemaid earns in a week. And there are 2 housemaids in this house who earn £12 a year, which works out at rather less than 5 shillings a week before you take out the cost of their tea and sugar allowance. Sugar has come down a great deal in the last 20 years, and thank heaven for it. But a loaf is still a serious object, and the house gets through more of it than anyone upstairs could guess, because sugar goes into the preserving and the cordials and the cakes and the punch and the sweetening of every unpleasant medicine anyone in the family ever takes. Now, set that against flour, which is not locked, and which sits in a bin in the kitchen passage with a wooden lid that anybody can lift. Flour is cheap. Flour is bulky. Flour is difficult to carry away in a pocket. And flour is consumed in such volume that a missing pound would be invisible in the week's baking anyway. There is no point in locking a thing you cannot count. That is the whole rule, and once you see it, every locked door in this house explains itself. What is locked is what is small, valuable, portable, and countable. Tea, sugar, spices, candles, especially the wax, wine, silver, linen. The house is not protecting itself against wickedness. It is protecting itself against arithmetic it cannot do. You know all this the way you know the stairs, without having to think it through. What you actually think about, standing at the scales with the cold coming up through the flags into your feet, is whether 9 sugar loaves will see you through to the end of the month with a house party coming. And the answer, which you arrive at somewhere between the rice and the currants, is no. 2 more will need ordering. You will remember that at the tradesman's hour. You always do. The book lives on the shelf by the door with a pencil tied to it on a length of string, because a pencil that is not tied to something will be gone within the fortnight. And that is not thieving either. That is simply what happens to pencils. You open it. The columns are ruled in your own hand, and the ruling is straight. And you are quietly proud of that in a way you would never say aloud. Date, article, quantity issued, remaining. Every line in the same small, upright writing going back through this book and the 2 before it. 4 years of what this house has eaten and burned and washed with. Tea, 4 ounces. Sugar, 3 pounds. Rice, 2 pounds. Currants, 1 pound. Soap, 2 bars. Candles, tallow, 1 dozen. The pencil makes a very small, dry noise on the paper. It is one of the quietest sounds in the house, and it is the one that everything else rests on, because at the end of the week, these figures become a total, and the total goes into the housekeeping account. And the housekeeping account goes in front of the master of the house on the 1st of the month. And if it has risen without an explanation, the explanation will be asked for, and it will be asked for of you. There is a particular satisfaction in this that you have never tried to describe to anyone. It is not the satisfaction of thrift, exactly. It is the satisfaction of a thing being known. Somewhere in the world, there is a great deal of muddle. Houses where nobody could say what the coal bill was last quarter, or how many sheets are in the press. And this is not one of them. And the reason it is not one of them is standing in a cold room at 6:30 in the morning with a pencil. You close the book. You put the smaller canister of tea and the weighed sugar and the rest onto the wooden tray that lives on the table for exactly this purpose. When you turn around, the cook is in the doorway. She has been there for a little while, you suspect, waiting rather than interrupting, which is a courtesy the two of you extend to one another, and did not always. She is a heavy woman of about 50, in a print gown and a coarse apron, with her sleeves already pushed up, and there is flour on the back of one wrist. She has her list in her hand. It is written on the back of an old envelope, because she will not use the paper you give her for the purpose, and never has. "Morning," she says. "Morning." She holds out the envelope. You take it and hold it toward the candle, and you read down it, and the two of you stand there in the cold storeroom in the last of the dark, and somewhere above your heads the first bell of the day has not yet rung. The list is not long. Bacon and the eggs she wants from the home farm, rather than the ones that came in on Tuesday, and a request for more of the good raisins, because she is making a pudding that the family likes, and the family will ask for it again on Sunday. You read it twice. You mark 2 things with the pencil and hand it back, and she looks at what you have marked and makes a small sound in her throat that is not quite disagreement, and goes. That sound is a conversation you have had perhaps 200 times in 9 years, and it takes 4 seconds, and both of you understand every word of it. The bell rings at 7. Breakfast in the servants' hall is at past. The hall itself sits at the end of the basement passage, below the level of the garden, with 2 high windows that let in a grey light from the area steps, and give you a view, if you care to look, of the boots of anybody who comes to the back door. It is a long room with a long deal table down the middle of it, scrubbed pale by decades of scrubbing, and a settle along one wall, and a clock, and a print of the Queen that has hung there since before you came and is beginning to fox in the corners. You come in, and the room stands up. This is the first thing that would strike anyone from outside, and it is worth slowing down for, because it is not politeness in the way that a stranger would understand politeness. The housemaids stand because you have come in. The hall boy stands because everybody else has. Nobody says anything about it. It happens at every meal, every day, in thousands of houses, and it is one of the small physical facts that hold a hierarchy in place. The way a keystone holds an arch, without anybody ever having to explain the arch. You sit at the head of the table. The butler sits at the foot. This is not negotiable, and never has been. Between you, down the 2 long sides, the household arranges itself in an order that no one has written down, and no one has ever needed to. The cook near the butler's end, because she is his equal in rank, then the lady's maid, then the head housemaid, then the second and third housemaids, then the laundry maid, then the still room maid, and at the far end, nearest the door and the draught, the hall boy who is 14 and eats as though somebody is coming to take the plate away from him. Breakfast is bread and butter, cold meat if there is any, and tea. The tea is yours, weighed out an hour ago. You pour. There is a rule in this house, as there is in most houses of this size, that the upper servants do not take the second course in the hall. When the meat and bread are done, and there is something better to follow, you rise, and the butler rises, and the cook and the lady's maid rise, and the four of you withdraw to your sitting room to finish. In some houses this is called the pug's parlour, which is a joke made by the lower servants, and the joke is not affectionate. You have never minded it. It seems to you an accurate description of a thing that is genuinely ridiculous and genuinely necessary at the same time. Here is something easy to misunderstand about a household like this one. The family upstairs is one structure, with a head and a hierarchy and a set of rules. The household below is another structure entirely, with its own head and its own hierarchy and its own rules. And those rules are in some respects stricter than anything upstairs. A duke's daughter may be careless about precedence at her own dinner table. A servant's hall almost never is. The people with the least power in the building are the people who enforce rank most exactly, because rank is the only thing in the building that is theirs. And the household below is not a single kingdom. It is two. The butler's territory is the front of the house, and the dining room, and everything that touches wine, silver, and the male servants. He has the footman, if there are footmen. He has the hall boy in practice, though not on paper. He has the cellar, and he has the plate. And when the family dines, he is the one standing behind the chairs, with the whole performance in his hands. Your territory is everything else. The housemaids answer to you. The laundry maid answers to you. The still room maid answers to you. The linen, the china, the stores, the bedrooms, the fires, the cleanliness of every room in the building answer to you. The cook, strictly, does not answer to you at all in a house of this size. She has her own kitchen and her own kitchen maids, and her own authority, and a wise housekeeper does not go into a kitchen and start giving orders. Unless she wants a war, she cannot win. What you have with the cook is not authority. It is a treaty. You hold the stores she needs, and she holds the skill the family wants. And the two of you have worked out over 9 years how to live alongside one another, without ever once putting the arrangement into words. The lady's maid is a different case again. She answers to the mistress and to nobody else, which makes her at once the most privileged and the least secure person at this table, because when the mistress goes, she goes. So the household is not a pyramid with one person at the top. It is more like a pair of adjoining fields with a shared hedge, and the two of you at either end of this table spend a great deal of quiet effort keeping the hedge in good repair. This morning there is a gap in it. The butler brings it up over the tea, which is his way, in a tone of pleasant inquiry that is not inquiry at all. "I shall want the plate safe again this morning," he says. "The middle-size salvers. Her ladyship's aunt is expected in a fortnight, and they want doing over. You do not answer at once. You butter your bread. The difficulty is small, and it is entirely a matter of principle, which makes it worse rather than better. The plate is his. The cleaning of it is his. But the plate safe stands in the strong room off your passage, because that is where the strong room is and always has been, and its key hangs on your ring. And the arrangement in this house has always been that the safe is opened in the presence of both of you and closed the same way. Last week he took the key from the housemaid, who had been sent to fetch you, opened the safe himself, took out what he wanted, and locked it after. Nothing was lost. Nothing was, even in any real sense, wrong. And yet, of course, you say, send the boy to me when you are ready, and I will come down with you. There is a pause of perhaps 2 seconds. It hardly needs the two of us, he says. It hardly does, you agree, until the day it does. He looks at you along the length of the table. You look back. Neither of you raises a voice, and neither of you says the actual sentence, which is that if a piece of plate is ever missing, the master will ask one question and one question only, which is who had the key. And on that morning, you will both want the answer to be the same as it has always been. You have known one another for 9 years. You have both been in service since you were girls. Neither of you has any illusion about what happens to a servant of 40 when a suspicion attaches itself, however unfairly, and never quite comes off again. Very well, he says, and reaches for the milk, and the thing is closed. The rest of the table has heard every word of that, and has given no sign of hearing any of it. The head housemaid is looking at her plate with great attention. The hall boy is eating. This too is part of the order of the hall, that a disagreement between the two heads of the household is conducted in full view and is understood by everyone to be private. You finish, you rise, and the butler rises, and the cook, and the lady's maid, and the 4 of you go along the passage to your sitting room where the fire is going, and there is a pot of coffee and a plate of something better than what was on the long table. The door closes behind you. Behind it, in the hall, the talk lifts immediately into a different register. The register that only exists once the upper servants are out of the room. And you have never once been curious enough to try to overhear it. You were a housemaid at that table. You know exactly what is said. The 4 of you sit for perhaps 10 minutes. The cook says the fishmonger's boy has been late twice. The lady's maid says her ladyship did not sleep well. The butler says nothing of consequence and reads a folded newspaper that came down from upstairs yesterday. It is not warm, this quarter of an hour, but it is comfortable, in the way that a chair you have sat in for years is comfortable, whatever its shape. Then the clock in the passage strikes 8, and it is over. You hear the hall emptying before you are on your feet. Chairs going back, the scrape and clatter of plates being carried through, boots on stone. The housemaids will be going up now with their boxes and their cloths, and the fires in the breakfast room, and the morning room will be wanting lighting, and the family will begin coming down within the hour, and must find the house looking as though nobody has touched it since last night. You put down your cup, you touch your keys, once without thinking, the way another woman might touch her hair before going into a room. Then you go out into the passage after them, The back stairs are narrow and turn twice, and you go up them at a pace that is neither hurried nor slow, because a housekeeper who runs has already lost the argument she is about to have. The house above you is still dark in its corners. Someone has drawn the shutters in the breakfast room, but not yet in the morning room. And the difference between the two rooms is the whole reason you are climbing these stairs at all. There are 3 housemaids in this house, and a 4th girl of 15 who is called a between maid, and who is, in practice, whoever needs her most that hour. The head housemaid has been here 11 years and does not require you. The second has been here 2. The third came at Michaelmas and is 17, and still, at this hour of the morning, frightened of you, which is inconvenient, because a frightened girl cleans badly. You begin where they began, which means you begin at the grates. A room in this house is done in an order, and the order is not a matter of preference. Ash and cinders first, because the dust from a grate travels and settles, and will ruin work already done. So the housemaid comes in with her box before the family are up, and she spreads a cloth on the hearthrug, and she rakes the dead fire, and she sifts the cinders through a wire sieve, because the unburnt lumps go back in the coal scuttle, and the fine ash goes to the ash heap, and is not thrown away either, since ash scours a stone floor as well as anything you can buy. Then the bars are done with black lead and a brush, and the steel fender and fire irons with emery paper, and only when the fireplace is finished and the cloth taken up does the rest of the room begin. You stand in the doorway of the morning room and watch the second housemaid finish a grate. She knows you are there. She does not look up, and she does not go faster, and that is correct. The black lead is on her hands to the wrist, and there is a smudge of it along her jaw, where she has pushed hair out of her eyes. This is ordinary. There is no way to do this work and stay clean, which is why the housemaids are up and finished with the dirtiest of it before the family sees a single one of them. The whole design of the morning is to move dirt out of rooms and out of sight before anyone with a claim on those rooms comes downstairs to occupy them. The new girl is in the library, and the library is where the trouble is. She has dusted. You can see that she has dusted, because the surfaces have been touched, and there is a cloth in her hand. And she is standing back from the writing table with the particular stiffness of a person who has just noticed you in the doorway and is trying to look as though she noticed you a minute ago. She has dusted the tops. She has not dusted the rails of the chairs, or the carved beading along the bookcase, or the underside of the mantel shelf, which is the first place any competent woman's hand goes when she is checking a room, precisely because it is the place nobody thinks to be looked at. There is a way to handle this, and there is a way to ruin a girl. You do not say anything in front of the second housemaid, who has come to the door behind you with her box. You wait until she has gone on to the drawing room. Then you go to the mantel shelf, and you run 2 fingers along the underside of it, and you hold your hand out, palm up, so that the girl can see what is on it, and you say nothing at all for a moment. Then you tell her to fetch her cloth and do it again. And while she does it, you stay, and you show her the beading and the chair rails and the turned legs of the table. And you tell her the thing that was told to you at 19 by a woman who has been dead a long while. that the parts of a room a person can see will be forgiven, and the parts they find with a hand will not, and that the whole art of it is to clean for the hand. She goes red to the ears. She will remember it. She will not, however, remember being made ridiculous in front of a girl 2 years her senior, because you did not do that. And the difference between those two memories is the difference between a housemaid who is still here in 5 years and one who gives notice at Lady Day. Correction is instruction. If it stops being instruction, it becomes something else. And something else does not produce clean rooms. It produces careful ones, which is not the same thing at all. Now, the cleaning itself is worth slowing down for, because there is very little in this house that comes out of a bottle with a label on it. There is no such thing, in this year, as a manufactured cleaner for general purposes. What there is instead is a small pharmacy of raw substances, most of which live behind the storeroom door and are issued by you in measured quantities, and none of which do more than one job. Soft soap, which is a brown jelly sold by the pound and used for scrubbing, soda for grease and for water that is too hard, whiting, which is powdered chalk, for cleaning paint and for polishing silver, fuller's earth for taking grease out of cloth, turpentine and beeswax melted together over hot water for the furniture, blacklead for the grates, emery paper for the steels, salt and lemon for stains on marble, vinegar for glass, and old newspaper to finish it, which produces a shine no cloth on earth will match, sand and ash for stone, ox gall bought from the butcher for carpets, which is exactly what it sounds like, and works better than anything invented since. Almost all of it is mixed here, in this house, by these women, from ingredients that are also food, or nearly food. The beeswax polish is made in the still room. The furniture cream is made in the still room. The scouring paste is soft soap, and whiting worked together in a jar. And every one of these has to be made in advance, in quantity, and stored, and issued, and accounted for, which is why the woman who holds the storeroom key is also the woman standing in the library doorway at 8:30 in the morning, telling a girl of 17 about the underside of a mantel shelf. The two things are one thing. Consider what this means for a single carpet. A carpet in a room in daily use is swept every morning with a stiff brush, and once a week it is strewn with damp tea leaves, which you have saved from the pot for this purpose, and which hold the dust down, instead of letting the brush throw it into the air, and then it is swept again. Twice a year it comes up entirely, is carried outside, hung over a line, and beaten, and the floor beneath it is scrubbed. That is one floor covering in one room, and this house has more rooms than you will visit before 10 o'clock. None of this is visible. That is the point of it. A morning room in which the family sit at 10 and find the fire lit, the grate black and gleaming, the fender bright, the paint washed, the glass clear, the carpet without a mark, and the air without a smell, is a room that has had 4 hours of hands laid on it by 3 women and a girl, and every one of them is meant to have finished and gone before anyone arrives to enjoy the result. At 8:45, you leave the housemaids to the bedrooms and go along the upper passage to the linen press. This is the second door you unlock today, and the key is a smaller one, brass, worn bright by use. The press is a cupboard the size of a small room, with deep shelves and it smells of clean cloth and lavender, and a faint cold sweetness from the dried orris root laid between the piles. Sheets on the lower shelves, pillowcases and bolster cases above. Table linen separate, because table linen is finer and is not to be handled by the same hands that carry it. Towels, huckaback, and diaper in their own division. Dusters and kitchen cloths at the far end, coarse and unfashionable, and just as carefully counted. You count. That is what this door is for. Every article in this cupboard is marked, in the corner, in red thread, with a number and a letter that tells you which set it belongs to and which year it entered the house. You keep a linen book, ruled in columns, and against each set there is a running tally. How many went to the wash? How many came back? How many are in use? How many are put by? This morning you find the second best sheets one short, and you know before you have finished the thought where it will be, because a sheet does not walk. It is on a bed in the blue room, where a maid has made up in haste, and it will come down with the wash on Monday. You take down 2 pillowcases that have gone thin at the center, and set them aside for the mending basket, and you mark them in the book, and you take a sheet from the bottom of the pile rather than the top, because linen used in rotation lasts, and linen used from the top wears out in 3s, while the bottom of the pile rots untouched. Small knowledge, the kind nobody thanks you for, and everybody notices the absence of. Then you lock the press and go back along the passage, and in the second bedroom the head housemaid has opened the sash wide to air the room, the way it is done every morning, whatever the weather, and the cold comes across the floor and up your sleeves as you pass. Outside the window the park is grey and beginning to be blue at the edges, and there is frost on the rail of the terrace, and somewhere below a door bangs. You put your hand on the sill for a moment. The stone is bitterly cold and clean. By 9:30, the front of the house has changed its character entirely. The grates are swept and lit. The hall smells of beeswax rather than ash, and the morning room has been warm for an hour. You go up the front stairs now, not the back ones, because this is the one part of the day when you are expected to be seen in the family's half of the house, and you go with the household book under your arm and a pencil in your pocket, and the keys hushed against your skirt with one hand so they do not announce you the whole length of the corridor. You knock, you wait. You are told to come in. The mistress is at the writing table by the window, with her letters spread in front of her, and a cup at her elbow, and she does not rise, and you do not expect her to. You stand until she indicates the chair, and then you sit, and the interview begins in exactly the same way it has begun every morning for the 11 years you have held this place. It looks like a conversation. It is closer to a set of nested decisions, most of which have already been made. Here is how it actually works. She asks what there is in the house. You tell her. You do not tell her everything in the house, because everything in the house is a list of some hundreds of items, and neither of you has the morning to spare. You tell her what there is that bears on today, that there is the greater part of a loin of mutton from yesterday, that the fishmonger's cart brings turbot on Thursdays, and today is Thursday, that the forced rhubarb from the frames is ready, and the last of the bottled cherries is not worth keeping past the week. You have chosen those 4 facts out of hundreds. In choosing them, you have drawn the outline of the day's dinner before she has said a word. Then she considers and says something like, "We might have the turbot," and you say, "Yes, ma'am," with a lobster sauce. And she says yes, and it is settled. But the lobster sauce was yours. She agreed to it. Agreeing to a thing and choosing it are not the same act, and both of you would say, if asked, that she orders the dinners in this house. Both of you would be telling the truth as the house understands truth. This is worth slowing down for, because it is the piece of the arrangement that the period's own advice books are most careful never to state plainly. The manuals for mistresses are full of instruction on how to superintend a housekeeper, how to check her accounts, how to prevent her from becoming too independent. What they do not say, because it would be indelicate to say it, is that a woman who has married into a house at 23 and borne 4 children and manages perhaps 3 hours of household attention in a day cannot possibly hold in her head the state of the storeroom, the condition of the linen, the temper of the cook, the price of coal this quarter, and the rotation of the kitchen garden. Somebody must hold all of that. The person who holds it is the person who decides, whatever the form of words used at 9:30 in the morning. So the fiction is maintained on both sides, willingly, because it is useful to both of you. She keeps her position as the one who orders. You keep yours as the one who never oversteps. And underneath the fiction, the actual work of running a household of 20-odd people gets done by somebody who has never once been described in any document that will survive this house as its manager. The menus take perhaps 10 minutes. Then the book comes out. You open the housekeeping book on your knee and turn it so she can see, though she rarely reads it closely on a Thursday. The close reading happens on Saturdays when the weekly total is struck, and 4 times a year when the master goes through the quarter with his own pen. You take her through the week so far. The butcher's account stands at rather more than usual because of the hams. The grocer's boy brought sugar on Tuesday, and you have the docket. There is a laundry item you want to raise, because the laundry maid has been sending out the fine things to the woman in the village for the last month at 3p a piece, and you think it might be done at home now that the copper is mended, and would save something like £2 over a year. She says, "Do as you think best." She says it warmly, and she means it, and it is the most powerful sentence anyone says to you all day. Do as you think best is authority handed across a table without ever being named as authority. It is also, and you are not sentimental about this, a transfer of risk. If the fine things come back from the copper scorched, the decision will be remembered as yours. Then she says, "There is something else," and puts down her pen, and tells you that her sister and her sister's husband will come in a fortnight and bring their 2 eldest, and that there will be others for the Saturday. And might there be, she thinks, 8 extra beds altogether. You say, "Very good, ma'am," in the tone of a woman being told a mildly interesting piece of news. Inside your head, the arithmetic has already started, and it does not stop for the rest of the morning. 8 extra beds is not 8 beds. 8 extra beds is the 3 spare rooms in the East Passage, aired and fired for 4 days beforehand, because a bed in an unheated room takes that long to lose its damp. And damp beds are how a house gets a reputation. It is the 2 rooms over the arch opened, which have not been used since last autumn, which means the chimneys swept, which means the sweep sent for, which means a morning of soot sheets, and every window in that passage open. It is mattresses turned, which takes 2 maids each and half a day. It is 8 sets of sheets, 8 pairs of blankets, and the counterpanes. And you are already running the linen book in your mind, and you can tell her, if she asks, that you have enough good sheets, and are short by 2 pairs of the second-best pillowcases, and that you will make them up out of the pair that came in with last year's order rather than buy. It is also the beds you are not being asked about. 2 visiting servants will come with the sister, a lady's maid, and probably a man. And they will want beds in the attics and places at the servants' hall table. And they will bring their own habits and their own opinions about precedents. And the lady's maid will expect to sit above your housemaids, and there will be some small trouble about it for the first 2 days. There always is. That is your affair entirely, and nobody upstairs will ever hear of it. And it is candles. 8 extra people burn candles, like nothing else in the house. And a house party is the one occasion when a quarter's careful economy in the storeroom can be undone in a week. You will draw an extra allowance, and you will hate doing it. And you will note in the book why the figure rose, so that when the master reads it in April, there is an explanation sitting on the page before he thinks to ask for one. None of this is spoken. What is spoken is 8 extra beds. What is spoken back is, "Very good, ma'am." Between those 2 short sentences sits about 4 days of labor for 6 people, and the whole of it will be arranged by you between now and the fortnight, in the gaps between everything else you do. She asks whether there is anything you require. There is one thing, and you raise it now, because the moment is favorable, and you have learned to read the weather of these interviews. The second housemaid is leaving at Lady Day to be married. You would like leave to write for another, before the party rather than after. So the new girl has 3 weeks to learn the house before it fills with strangers. She agrees at once, because it costs her nothing, and because you have never asked for a thing that was not sensible. You do not ask for a rise in your own wage. You have not asked for yours. There is a proper season for that, and it is not a Thursday morning in a cold spring, and you know precisely when it will be, and you will let the party be got through triumphantly first. Then she picks up her pen, which is the signal, and you rise, and you say the small closing formula that you have said several thousand times in this room, and you go out. The door closes behind you with the particular soft heaviness of a door that is properly hung and properly maintained, which it is because you have it seen to. The corridor is warm. Below you, faintly, the front door bell goes, and further off there is the noise of the housemaids moving a bedstead. And your keys, which have hung silent against your skirt for the whole quarter of an hour because you held them still with your hand, come loose as you walk and sound out along the passage. One small metallic conversation, shifting and settling with every step, the sound arriving in each room a second before you do. The still room is at the cold end of the passage, past the china closet and before the door to the backyard, and it is yours in a way that no other room in this house is yours. The mistress has never been inside it. The master would not know how to find it. It is a whitewashed room with a stone floor, a small range at one end, a deep sink with a wooden draining board, and shelves from the floor to a foot below the ceiling on 3 walls. The window faces north, which is deliberate, because a still room wants to be cool and even and out of the sun. And whoever built this house 110 years ago knew that as ordinary fact. You unlock it at 10:15 and prop the door with the iron wedge, because the fruit is already in and waiting, and because on a preserving morning the heat will build and you want somewhere for it to go. The name is older than what happens here now. In the 1600s, a still room held an actual still, and the lady of a great house distilled her own waters, rose water and lavender water, and 100 remedies of varying honesty. And the room was where a gentlewoman's practical education lived. That has drained away over 2 centuries into something more useful and less romantic. What you distill is the surplus of a kitchen garden into things that will keep. Jams, jellies, cordials, bottled fruit, dried herbs, candied peel at Christmas, and the household's own vinegar. The still room maid also makes the tea and coffee for the upper servants, and cuts the bread and butter for the schoolroom, which nobody mentions in the manuals, but which occupies a great deal of her actual day. This morning it is gooseberries, 4 large baskets of them, brought up from the garden at first light by the under-gardener, and left in the yard with the dew still on them. They are green and hard and hairy and unpleasant to handle, and they are also the first fruit of the year, and therefore a kind of small event. The still room maid is 19. She has been here 14 months. She is topping and tailing the gooseberries with a small knife, which means cutting the stalk from one end and the withered flower from the other, 1 berry at a time, 4 baskets of them, and she has been at it for half an hour and will be at it for another hour and a half. Her hands will be green and sore by dinner. There is no faster way. There will not be a faster way in her lifetime. You take a stool and sit down opposite her and begin topping and tailing as well. And this is worth noticing, because you would not do this in the kitchen, and you would not do it in the servants' hall. In the still room, the rules bend. Nobody senior to you will come in. You can work with your hands beside a girl of 19 for an hour, and the hierarchy will be exactly where you left it when you stand up. This room is the only place in the house where you are permitted to be simply competent at something without also being watched. Your own book lies open on the end of the table, with a jug standing on it to hold the page. It is a thick 1/4 volume, bound in dark leather, and it is not printed. It is written. The first 60 pages are in a hand that is not yours, small and slanted and very regular, belonging to the housekeeper who was here before you, and who died in Somerset at her sister's house 6 years ago. Then there is a gap of 2 pages, and then your own hand begins. You have never crossed out any of hers. You have written underneath them. Beneath her receipt for gooseberry jam, in your writing, 3 lines. Less sugar by 1/4, boils faster than she says. Take off the fire the moment it draws back from the spoon. Beneath her raspberry vinegar, 1 line, does not keep past March, make half. This is how the book works. It is a conversation between 2 women, one of whom is dead, conducted entirely in the margins of fruit. Nothing in it is exact in the way a chemist would want. Take as much sugar as you have fruit. Boil till it jellies. A walnut of butter. A wine glass of brandy. The quantities assume a woman who already knows what she is doing, and they are useless to anyone who does not, which is why a still room cannot be learned from a book, and must be learned from a person, and why the girl opposite you is worth training, and why it takes years. Here is what a well-managed still room is actually worth, because the figures are not small, and they are the reason this room exists at all. The kitchen garden and the orchard produce, in a good year, far more soft fruit than the family can eat fresh. Gooseberries, currants of 3 colors, raspberries, plums, damsons, apples, quinces. Left alone, all of it rots inside a fortnight. Preserved, it becomes the whole sweet side of the table from October to May, when there is nothing growing and nothing fresh to be had. Jam at breakfast, tart filling at dinner, jelly with the mutton, cordial for the nursery, bottled fruit when the mistress wants something on a Sunday, and there is nothing in the ground. Bought in, that same range of things costs money. A pound pot of decent jam from a grocer runs somewhere between 8p and a shilling. This house will get through something in the region of £200 of preserves in a year, between the family, the school room, the servants' hall at Sunday tea, and the pots that go out as gifts to tenants and to the vicarage. Bought, call it £8 or £9 a year, which is 1/5 of your entire wage. Made here, the fruit costs nothing, because it is grown on the place, and the only real outlay is the sugar, which is not nothing at all. Sugar is the whole economics of this room. It is why the store-room is locked. Good loaf sugar is around 6p the pound, and you will use very nearly pound for pound with the fruit, which means the sugar for this morning's gooseberries alone will run to something over £1 by the time the last pot is sealed. That is why you weigh it yourself, why you carry it in yourself, why it does not sit out on this table in an open bowl at any point in the process. Not because anyone here would take it, because the arithmetic has to close, and things that are not counted stop closing very quickly. Set against the sugar, the saving is still real, £5 or £6 clear on the year, and beyond the saving, there is the thing that does not appear in any column. The house is never caught short. Unexpected callers, an extra dozen at tea, a hamper wanted for someone ill in the village at 2 hours' notice, and the answer is always yes, and the answer is always yes because of a shelf in a cold north-facing room that somebody stocked 9 months earlier while thinking about a February that had not happened yet. The gooseberries are done. She has green stains to the second knuckle, and she flexes her hands twice and says nothing about it, which is progress, because in October she said something about it. You weigh the fruit into the preserving pan, which is copper, unlined, and heavy enough that she cannot lift it full, and you do not pretend otherwise. Copper because it takes the heat evenly, and lets the jam boil hard and fast without catching, and because sugar and fruit are acid enough to keep the metal bright. You scour it with salt and vinegar before and after, every time, without exception, and you have told her why twice, and will not tell her a third time. Then the sugar goes in, and the pan goes onto the range, and the room changes. This is the part that is genuinely pleasant, and there is no reason to be embarrassed about saying so. The smell comes up in stages. First, the sharp green smell of the raw fruit going soft. Then the sugar catching and turning it round and warm. Then, after 20 minutes of hard boiling, that particular deep sweetness that gets into the wool of your gown and stays there until washing day, so that you will still smell faintly of gooseberries at 9 tonight in your own sitting room. You stand over it with a long wooden spoon and skim the scum off the top into a saucer, pale green froth, and the girl watches the saucer with obvious interest, because the scum on the first pan of the year is traditionally hers to eat on bread. And you let that tradition stand because it costs nothing, and because there ought to be some small ceremony to the first fruit. The testing is the whole skill, and it cannot be written down. You take a little on the spoon and tip it, and you watch how it comes off the edge. At first it runs like water. Then it runs thicker. Then, at the moment that matters, it stops running and gathers at the lip and falls away in 2 heavy flakes that meet and drop together. And that is it. And you have perhaps 40 seconds before the same pan makes something stiff and dull that will taste of burnt sugar all winter. She does not see it yet. You call her over and hold the spoon and tip it and say, "There." And she looks, and you know from her face that she is looking at the wrong thing. This is the 4th time you have shown her. You will show her the 5th time in 3 weeks with currants, and probably a 6th after that. And somewhere around the 9th or 10th, she will see it all at once, and thereafter will never not see it, and will teach it herself in some other house in 15 years, and think it was always obvious. Your patience for this is genuine, and it is also finite, and the line between them is not where people imagine. You will explain the same thing 10 times without any edge in your voice. What you will not tolerate is a jar going up on the shelf unlabeled, or a pot filled to the brim so the covering cannot be tied down, or the pan left standing dirty until the afternoon. Instruction is infinite. Carelessness gets 1 warning, off the fire, then, and a short rest so the fruit does not float, and then the filling, which is fast and hot and requires both of you. The jars have been standing in the low oven, so they are warm, because a cold jar and boiling jam is a broken jar and a lost quarter of an hour. You fill, she wipes the rims. You lay the little discs of paper soaked in brandy directly onto the hot surface. Then the covers over the top, tied down with string wound twice, and knotted, because a loose cover means mold by December. Then the labels, in your hand, in ink. Gooseberry, the month, the year, everyone. 24 pots stand cooling on the board, the colour of them going from cloudy to clear as they set, faintly green, and then greener, where the light comes through the window behind them. You leave them until after the servants' dinner. Then you carry them through, 6 at a time on a tray, and unlock the door of the storeroom, and set them at the back of the second shelf, where the light does not reach, and write 24 gooseberry into the book, and the date. And you lock the door again. The back door of a house like this one has its own hours, and everyone in the county who sells anything knows them. Between 11 and 12:30, the yard gate stands open, and the gravel behind the kitchen wing takes a steady traffic of carts and boys and baskets, and none of it comes anywhere near the front of the house, which is the entire point. The family will eat fish this evening. The family will not see the fish arrive, will not see it carried in wet paper across the yard, will not know that the fishmonger's man came 20 minutes later than he ought, and that you noticed. You go out to meet them yourself. You could send a housemaid. A great many housekeepers do send a housemaid, and a great many housekeepers find at the end of the quarter that the accounts have a soft place in them that nobody can quite explain. So you go out in your black gown, with the store book under your arm and the pencil in your pocket, and you stand in the doorway where the light is good. The grocer's boy comes first from the town with the order you sent on Monday. He is 15 or so, and his cart is loaded in the way boys load carts, which is to say, the heavy goods are on top of the light ones. You have him set everything down on the scrub table by the door, rather than carry it straight through, and then you go through it, item by item, against the paper in your hand. 6 pounds of rice. You lift the paper packet and feel the weight of it, because your hands have weighed 6 pounds several thousand times, and they will tell you before any scale does if the thing is short. Currants, which you open and look into, because currants come with stalks and grit in them if the grocer thinks nobody at the far end is looking. And you have had that argument with this grocer's father. Soap, blacking for the grates. Candles, both the good wax for above stairs and the tallow for the passages. And these you count, not weigh, because they come in dozens and dozens, are easy to miscount in the direction of the man selling them. The boy stands with his hands behind his back and waits. He has been told to wait. His master has told him that at this house you check everything, and that there is no use hurrying the woman in the black gown, and that if something is wrong, he is to say nothing clever, and simply carry it back. This morning, something is wrong. The sugar loaf is a good deal darker than the last, and the price on the paper is the price of the better grade. You do not raise your voice. You do not accuse the boy of anything, because the boy has done nothing, and shouting at a child in a yard is the behavior of a woman who has lost control of her house. You put your finger on the figure, and you say that this is not the sugar you ordered, and that you will not sign for it at that price, and that he may take it back with your compliments, and tell his master you will expect the right loaf tomorrow before noon, or you will send the order elsewhere next month. Then you sign for everything else, and enter it in the book, and let him go. This is worth slowing down for, because the checking is not suspicion in the way we would understand it now. It is not that you believe the grocer to be a thief. It is that in a household with no telephone, no receipts issued as a matter of course, no returns policy, and no expectation that the buyer will ever compare one week against another, the only mechanism preventing slow drift in weights and grades is a person at the receiving end who compares one week against another. You are that mechanism. If you stop being it for 2 months, the sugar gets darker, and the currants get stalkier, and the price stays exactly where it was, and nobody involved will have committed a crime. Which brings us to the book. There is more than one book, in fact, and part of what makes a good housekeeper is knowing which figure lives where. There is the store book, which records what comes into the storeroom and what is issued out of it, and which lets you say on any given Tuesday how many pounds of candles remain in the house. there is the cook's book, kept by the cook, but reviewed by you, which records the meat and the fish and the garden produce and anything perishable. And there is the housekeeping account book proper, which is the one that matters, the one that goes upstairs. That book is ruled in columns and totaled weekly. Down the left, the tradesman by name. Across the top, the days. Every sum you pay out, or promise to pay, sits in a square, and at the end of the week the squares add across and add down, and the two totals must agree, which is a piece of arithmetic older than double entry, and rather more merciless, because if they do not agree, you find the error before you close the book. Not after. Before. You are given money for this. In this house it comes monthly, an advance against the household expenses, handed over by the master himself, and receipted in your hand. It is a considerable sum, more than most people in the county will hold in cash in a year, and it sits in a locked drawer in your sitting room. And the key to that drawer does not hang on the chatelaine at your waist. It hangs on a ribbon around your neck, under the collar, where it cannot be lifted and cannot be lost. At the end of the quarter, the book goes up. The master reads it. Not the mistress, whatever she may say about the menus, because money in this house travels along a different line entirely, and the line runs from him to you and back to him, with no woman of the family standing anywhere on it. He sits with the book and a pen, and he goes down the totals, and he may ask about a figure, and you must be able to answer any figure in it from memory or from the store book, on the spot, without hunting. If the account is short, the shortfall comes out of your wages. That is not a threat anyone makes out loud. It is simply how it works, and every housekeeper in England knows it, which is why the arithmetic is done twice, and the receipts are kept in a japanned tin, and the drawer key hangs on a ribbon. Now, here is the part that people writing about service in this period tend to hurry past, and it deserves better. There is a system, universally known and universally denied, by which tradesmen pay the servant who places the order. It has a polite name. It is called the poundage, or the commission, or in plainer houses simply the perquisite, and it works like this. The butcher who supplies your house adds a small amount to every bill, and at the end of the quarter he returns a portion of what he has been paid to the person who chose him. A shilling in the pound is common. In some houses it is more. The family pays it without ever seeing it, because it is folded into the price of the mutton. Every housekeeper is offered it. You were offered it in this house, in your first month, by a coal merchant, who was very pleasant about it, and clearly assumed the matter was settled before he opened his mouth. And it is not against the law, and it is not thought disgraceful by half the profession. And a woman on £45 a year, who takes her poundage on a household spending £800, can quietly double her income and retire at 55 with a cottage. You refused it. You have gone on refusing it for 11 years. Not because you are made of finer material than the women who take it. You are not, and you have never pretended so. And one of the best housekeepers you ever worked under took hers openly and kept a house you could have eaten off. You refuse it because of what it does to the one thing you actually own. Think about what your position rests on. Not wages, which are decent and not remarkable. Not property, of which you have none. Not family. What you have is a reputation of a very particular kind, that any figure in your book is the true figure, that any tradesman dealing with this house deals at the honest price, that if you say the sugar was short, the sugar was short. That reputation is what makes the master hand you the quarter's money without counting it. It is what makes the butler, who outranks you in the eyes of the world, treat the plate safe as a matter of joint responsibility rather than his own affair. And it is the only thing you will have to sell when you leave here, because a housekeeper does not get another place on charm. She gets it on a character from her last employer, and on what the tradesmen of the county say about her when asked. The moment you take a shilling in the pound, every one of those things becomes negotiable, and the man who paid you knows it, and he will not forget it, and he will not always be pleasant about remembering. So the coal merchant was told, politely, that this house pays the price on the invoice, and nothing else, and that if he wished to keep the order, he might send his best figure and let it stand. He kept the order. He has kept it for 11 years, at a price you would defend against any house in the county. The yard is empty by 12:30. The gate is pulled to. You carry the day's papers through to your sitting room and sit down at the small table by the window with the ink and the ruler, and you rule the columns fresh, and you enter the morning. The rice, the currants, the soap, the candles counted and not weighed, the sugar not signed for and struck through with a note in the margin. Then the fish, and the price by the pound, and the weight as delivered and not as invoiced, because they differ by 4 ounces, and you have written both. Then you add the week across, and add it down. The 2 totals agree. The servants dine at 1. It is one of the few fixed points in the day that nobody argues about, because the meal below stairs has to be finished and cleared before the family's luncheon goes up, and the kitchen cannot do both at once. You eat with the upper servants in your own room, as you have every day for 11 years, and the meal is short, and the talk is mostly about the house party, and whether the second-best bedroom chimney is going to smoke again. By 2:30, the hall below is empty. The housemaids are upstairs at their afternoon work, which is quieter work, mending and turning mattresses and going over the drawing room in the dead hour when nobody uses it. The kitchen has gone slack for an hour before the dinner preparations begin in earnest. The cook has her feet up on a stool, and a cup of tea she has made too strong. This is the hour you like best, and it is not because it is restful. It is because it is the hour when nobody wants anything from you, and you can do the part of the work that requires you to be alone with your own attention. You go to the china closet. It sits off the passage between the kitchen and the servery. A narrow room with no window, shelved from floor to ceiling on 3 sides, and it is kept locked because everything in it can be broken by a person walking past it with a full tray and a thought elsewhere. You light the lamp on the bracket. You do not use a candle in there, and you have never let anyone else use one either, because a candle carried in one hand means only one hand left for the china. The dinner service is white, with a narrow gold band and a small crest, and it came into the house in the year the master's father married. 'Tis not the most expensive thing on the shelves. It is simply the thing that is used most, and therefore the thing that has been diminished most. and the record of that diminishment is a column in a book kept on the shelf inside the door. You take the book down, and you begin the count. 24 dinner plates, and you touch each one as you count it, which is not superstition, but method, because a plate with a crack in the glaze will sound different from a plate without one when the edge of your ring meets it. 22 soup plates, and there were 24 in the year the service came, and the 2 that are missing went in 1869 and 1874, and both are entered in the book with the date and the circumstance. 18 dessert plates. 14 of the small side plates, which were never a complete number to begin with. The 2 vegetable dishes with their covers, and one cover has been repaired with a rivet at the rim, and the rivet is nearly invisible, unless you know to look. And you always look. Here is something worth slowing down for, because the numbers explain a great deal about how a house of this kind actually thinks. A dinner service of this quality, bought new and complete from a maker of any reputation, cost something in the region of £30 when this one was purchased. And that was for the dinner service alone, without the dessert service, without the tea things, without the breakfast china, which is a different pattern entirely and lives on a different shelf. £30. Your wage for the year is 45. The kitchen maid, who is 17 and does the roughest work in this house, earns £12 a year and her keep. So when a plate goes, the loss is not sentimental. It is arithmetic. A single dinner plate from a service like this one cannot simply be replaced, because the maker may have altered the pattern, or discontinued it, or gone out of business, and even where a replacement can be, it must be ordered and matched and paid for, and it will arrive weeks later looking very slightly newer than everything around it. A service does not wear out. It runs down one piece at a time over 30 or 40 years, until the day comes when there are not enough matched plates to seat the number of people the family wishes to seat, and the whole thing has to be replaced at once, and the sum involved is the sum of a good horse, which is why a chipped plate is an event in this house, and why the question that follows a breakage is always the same question. Who was carrying it? You have a view about that question, which is not universally shared among housekeepers, and you have held it long enough now that it has become simply how this house does things. In a great many houses, breakages are stopped out of wages. The rule is stated plainly when a girl is engaged. What she breaks, she pays for, and the logic of it is easy to follow, because it makes the person carrying the tray careful in a way that nothing else will. But the practical result of that rule, in every house where you have seen it enforced, is not fewer breakages. It is fewer reported breakages. The girl who drops a saucer on the stone floor at 11 at night, alone, with a week's wages standing on the outcome, will sweep the pieces into her apron and carry them out to the ash heap, and say nothing at all. And then you find the number short at the quarter's count, and you do not know when it happened, or how, or whether it is going to happen again, in the same way, at the same corner of the same passage. So your rule is different. A breakage reported at once, honestly, is entered in the book with the circumstance, and nothing more is said, unless it becomes a habit. A breakage concealed is a different matter entirely, and it is a matter about the girl's honesty rather than her hands, and honesty is the thing this house cannot do without. You have had to speak to 2 girls in 11 years about a concealed breakage. Neither of them did it twice. The count comes out right. You write the date at the head of the column and your initials at the foot, and you put the book back on its shelf inside the door, and you take the lamp down and go out and turn the key. The plate is a separate business, and it is a business you do not conduct alone. Silver is not china. China is expensive. Silver is money. The soup tureen on the top shelf of the plate safe would fetch, if it were sold for its weight and nothing more, a sum that would keep a laboring family for a year, and it would fetch a good deal more than that sold as what it is. Every large house in this county holds in one locked cupboard a quantity of portable wealth that exceeds the annual income of most of the people living within 5 miles of it, and everybody in the house knows this, and nobody says it out loud, which is why the rule about the plate safe exists, and why you have never once in 11 years bent it. The butler keeps one key, you keep the other. The safe is opened when both of you are present, and it is closed the same way, and the count is made by the 2 of you together, with the book open between you and both sets of initials at the bottom of the page. Not because you distrust him. You have worked beside the man for over a decade, and you would trust him with a great deal more than silver. The rule exists precisely so that trust is never the thing being relied upon. Consider what happens on the day something is missing. In a house where one person alone held the key, there is one person to ask, and the question is unanswerable. And whatever that person says, the doubt attaches to them for the rest of their working life. A character can be written in perfectly correct language and still carry a shadow that follows a servant from house to house. But in a house where the safe cannot be opened by one person, the missing item is a fact about the house rather than a fact about a person. And there is a book, and the book has 2 names in it going back years, and the 2 names agree. The rule does not protect the silver particularly. It protects you. So at 3 o'clock, the butler comes down the passage with his key in his hand, and the 2 of you go into the plate room together, and the door stands open behind you, because that is also part of it. He reads from the book, and you handle the pieces, which is the way you have always divided it, and the count goes forward. The tureen, the sauce boats, the entree dishes with their covers, the candelabra in their baize bags, the 24 tablespoons, and the 24 forks, and the smaller service that only comes out for the dessert. He reads a number. You count aloud. He makes a small mark against the line. There is one place in the book, 4 years back, where the marks stop, and there is a note in your hand about a fish slice sent to Bath for repair, and returned 11 days later, with the date of its going and the date of its return, and the name of the man who took it, and the name of the man who brought it back. You wrote all of that down for a piece of silver worth perhaps £2. You would write it again. The count is right. He initials. You initial. The door is closed, and each of you turns your own key in your own lock, and the sound is not the sharp scrape of a lock that wants oil, but a low, even, settling sound, 2 parts of a mechanism meeting and seating together, and it is one of the most satisfying sounds in this house. He goes back up. You stand a moment in the cool of the passage with the keys at your waist gone quiet again. And you think, without any particular feeling about it, that in the whole of this house there is only one other person who knows exactly what is behind that door, and he has just gone up the stairs to lay out the decanters. The house above you begins to change at about 5 o'clock, and you can feel it from below without seeing any of it. It starts with hot water. The dinner hour in this house is 7:30, which is late by the standards of your girlhood, and quite ordinary now. And the dressing that precedes it requires water carried up the back stairs in brass cans with cloths over the tops to keep the heat in and the dust out. 2 cans to each bedroom in use, more if there are guests, and each can holds enough to fill a hip bath a third of the way, which is all anyone expects. The water is heated in the scullery copper and in the kettles on the kitchen range, and it goes up in a steady traffic of housemaids on the back stairs, and you stand at the foot of those stairs for a few minutes, simply watching the traffic and counting it, because the one thing that will ruin a dinner before it begins is a lady upstairs sitting in a cold room with no water, and a maid unable to say when it will come. Then the candles. Then the coal. You have a particular feeling about the coal at this hour. Every fire in the house that will be wanted between now and midnight has to be built up before the family comes down, because nobody wishes to see a housemaid on her knees in the drawing room, grate at 8 in the evening with a scuttle beside her. So the fires are made up early, and they are made up generously, and the scuttles are filled and set back, and the hearths are swept clean of the day's ash. And by 7, the rooms that will be used are warm, and the rooms that will not be used are shut. You go through them yourself. Drawing room, dining room, the small library where the gentleman may go afterward, the hall. You put your hand near each grate without touching it. You look at the level of the coal. You look at the candles in the sconces and the lamps on the tables, and whether the wicks have been trimmed and the glasses cleaned, because a smoking lamp at dinner is a thing everyone notices and nobody forgives. The point of all of it is that none of it should be visible. The water arrives, the fires are warm, the candles burn clean, and the family comes down a staircase into a house that appears to have arranged itself. That is the whole art. Everything you have done since 5:30 is designed to leave no trace of having been done. At about 6, with the house in that state of being ready and not yet begun, you go back to your own sitting room, and the cook comes to you, and you have your tea. This is not a formality, and it is not on any list. It happens most evenings that allow it, which is to say most evenings when there is no party and no illness and nothing gone wrong. She brings up whatever she has that is worth eating, and you provide the tea, which is yours, from your own allowance, and the two of you sit for perhaps 20 minutes in 2 chairs beside a small fire, and you talk. You talk about the fish, mostly. About whether the man in the village is charging what he ought. About her sister in Bristol, who writes to her twice a year about a bad batch of yeast and a good delivery of butter, and whether the youngest kitchen maid is going to be worth keeping past Michaelmas. Very rarely, and never for long, you talk about the family, and when you do, it is in a language of implication, so worn and comfortable that a stranger listening would hear nothing at all in it. She is the only person in this house you speak to as an equal. She holds her position by her own skill. She is answerable to the mistress, and to nobody below stairs. She has her own kingdom in the kitchen, exactly as you have yours in the storeroom, and neither of you can give the other an order. That is precisely why the friendship is possible. Rank is what makes it safe. Here is something worth slowing down for, because it explains more about a life like yours than any account book will. The upper servants of a great house occupy a position that has no equivalent anywhere else in the society of the time. Below you are perhaps a dozen people you may instruct, correct, dismiss, and be responsible for, and with whom you cannot be familiar, because familiarity destroys your ability to correct them. Above you is a family who rely on you absolutely, who trust you with the keys to everything they own, who will ask after your health and send you soup if you are ill, and who are not, and will never be, your friends. You take your meals apart from the lower servants for the second course. You do not take your meals with the family at all. You are addressed as Mrs., a courtesy given to housekeepers and cooks regardless of marriage, and you have never been married, and the title sits on you like a coat cut for somebody else that has, over 20 years, come to fit. Most women of your class in this century marry, or go into service, and the two are largely exclusive. A housemaid who marries leaves. A cook who marries leaves. A housekeeper who marries leaves. The position you hold is one of the very few in the whole of England that gives a woman without property real authority over money, over staff, over the daily running of a large and expensive concern. And the price of it, plainly stated, is that you hold it alone. Nobody set out to design it that way. It simply followed from the fact that a married woman's time and person belonged legally to her husband, and no household could employ a woman whose first obligation lay somewhere else. So there is the shape of your evenings. 20 minutes with the cook, a fire, a pot of tea from your own quarter's allowance, and a conversation about butter. It is not nothing. Some nights it is a great deal. She goes down at about 20 minutes past 6, because the sauces will not wait, and you sit for a moment longer with the cup in your hands. There is a knock, which is not the cook coming back for something forgotten, because the cook does not knock. It is one of the housemaids, the second one, the girl who came to you at 17 with a good character from a farm, and a way of scrubbing a grate as though she were angry with it. She is 19 now, and she is better at everything than she was, and she stands in your doorway with her hands folded in front of her apron, in the way that means she has rehearsed the first sentence. She has heard of a place, a house nearer to Bristol, a smaller establishment, 4 servants instead of 11, and the position offered is head housemaid, which she is not here, and will not be here for another 3 or 4 years at the earliest, because the woman above her shows no sign of leaving. The wages are £2 a year more than she has now. She wants to know what you think. You ask her the questions you would ask. How many in the family? Whether there are young children, because young children mean nurseries, and nurseries mean a different kind of work altogether. Whether there is a housekeeper at all in a house of 4, or whether the mistress does it herself, which changes everything about what her days will be. Whether she has seen the place or only heard of it. Who told her? Then you tell her the truth, which is that a smaller house with the title of head housemaid will teach her more in 2 years than 5 years here will, because here she is, one of 4, and there she will be one of 2. And a girl who has done everything is worth more than a girl who has done one thing very well. You tell her that the £2 matters less than the character she will carry away from it. You tell her to ask about the beer money and the tea and sugar allowance before she agrees to anything, and to find out whether they provide her print dresses or expect her to buy them, because that alone can eat the £2 and more. And you tell her that if she goes, you will write for her, and that what you write will be true, and that what is true is good. She thanks you, and stands there a moment, as though there were something else, and there is not, and she goes. You sit with that for a little while. You have had this conversation perhaps 30 times in your working life. Most of them go, and most of them do well, and a few of them write to you at Christmas for 2 or 3 years, and then stop, which is not unkindness, only the ordinary weight of other people's lives. You have never once told a girl to stay for your own convenience, and you count that as one of the few things about yourself you are entirely certain of. The bellboard in the passage begins to ring at about 7:15. First the dressing room, then the drawing room, and you hear the answering feet on the stairs. Below you, the kitchen has gone into that state it holds for an hour and a half, a controlled hurry with no wasted movement in it, and the dishes begin to go up, and the hot plates go up ahead of them, and the butler's voice carries once, briefly, and stops. There is nothing for you to do in any of it. Your part was finished when the fires were made up, and the water went up in the brass cans. You take the tea things through to be washed, and you stand for a moment at the foot of the back stairs, with the keys quiet at your waist, listening to a dinner you will never sit down to, in a house that is running exactly as you arranged it to run. The dinner takes 2 hours and a little more, and for most of that you are in your sitting room with the door half open, which is how you have listened to houses for 20 years. You do not need to see anything. The sounds tell you where the meal has got to, the heavy tread of the footman going up with the second course, the pause, the lighter run of the still room maid with the ices, the particular clatter that means the plates have come down and the scullery has begun its long night. You correct nothing? There is nothing to correct. A dinner that has been arranged properly at 7 in the morning does not need arranging again at 9 at night. By 10:30, the drawing-room bell has stopped ringing, and by 11 the family have gone up, and the house begins to empty itself downward, room by room, like water finding a level. This is the part of the day that belongs to you alone, and you have never once handed it to anyone else. You take a candle in a flat brass holder, the sort with a low handle and a broad drip pan, and you begin at the top and work down. The bedroom floors first, not into the rooms. That is not your business at this hour, but along the passages, where you check that the night lamps are burning low and steady, and that no one has left a candle standing on a chest of drawers where a sleeve might catch it. You have known a house lost that way. Not this one. A house at Marlborough, when you were a young upper housemaid, and everyone got out and nothing else happened. And still you have never forgotten the look of the ceiling above a bed with a black bloom spread across it. It is why you walk the passages yourself. It is why, when the under-housemaid offered last spring to do it for you and save your legs, you thanked her and said no. Down to the first floor. The drawing-room fire is banked and guarded, the fender in place, the hearthrug turned back at the corner nearest the coals, which is a small thing the housemaid does because you taught her to. The lamps are out. The windows are latched. You put your hand flat on the shutter bar of the long window at the end, the one that swells in wet weather and does not always seat properly, and you feel it go home. The dining room still smells of the evening, wax and wine and the ghost of a sauce, and the faint sharpness of the flowers going over in the centre épergne. The table has been cleared and rubbed, and the covers are on. You lift a corner of one to see that the surface underneath is dry, because damp under a cover will mark mahogany in a night, and there is no way to explain that to anyone that does not sound like an excuse. Then the ground floor, and the doors, the garden door, the door to the yard, the area door, the door at the end of the passage that gives onto the stable side, which is the one that gets left on the latch more often than any other, because the men are in and out of it all day. And think of it as a gate rather than a door. You turn each one, and you draw the bolt where there is a bolt, and each turn goes into the same place in your hand that every other turn of the day has gone into, so that by now the movement is less a decision than a habit sitting in the wrist. The storeroom, the still room, the china closet, the linen press on the half landing, the plate safe, which the butler has already locked, and which you try anyway, once, the way you have tried it every night for 11 years, and which he knows you try, and about which neither of you has ever spoken a single word. The wine cellar door, locked, its key on his ring, and not on yours, and you pass it without touching it at all. 23 turns on an ordinary night. More when there are guests. You have never counted them aloud, and you would not be able to say the number if someone woke you and asked. But your hand knows when one is missing. And twice in your life, your hand has known before your mind did. And you have gone back down a passage in the dark to find a door standing open onto a wet garden. You come at last to your own sitting room, and you put the candle on the table, and you sit down, and you open the book. Every day of your working life has ended at this table with this book. The columns are ruled in your own hand, because the printed ones sold by the stationers in Bath leave too little space in the middle, and you gave them up years ago. Today's entries have been going in as the day went, a line at a time, but the totalin waits until now, when the house is quiet and nobody will come in with a question halfway through a column. Sugar issued. Tea issued. Candles 17. Soap, the fish, weighed at the door and entered at the weight it actually was, rather than the weight on the note, which is a distinction that has saved this household something like £9 or £10 a year across the time you have kept it. The butcher's account, carried forward. The laundry list, checked against what came back. 2 towels short, which will be 3 by Friday, and will then turn out to be nowhere at all. And you make a note of it in the margin in the small private shorthand you have used since you were 30, because a note in the margin is a question, and an entry in the column is an accusation, and you have always been careful about which one you are making. The sum comes out. it very nearly always comes out. There is a plain satisfaction in that which you have never tried to explain to anyone, because the people who would understand it do not need it explained, and the people who would not are not interested. Then, before you close the book, you decide tomorrow, not on paper, in your head, in order, the way you have done it since you were first given a house of your own to run. The blacking for the range, which is low, the fruit for the housekeeper's room preserves, which must be done Thursday, or not at all this week. The girl's half-day, which she has not asked for, and which you will give her without being asked, because she has earned it, and because a thing given is worth more than a thing granted. The 8 beds for the house party, and the 8 sets of linen, and the airing of them, which begins the day after tomorrow, whether the weather obliges or not. By the time you close the cover, tomorrow already exists. It has been made. It will arrive in the morning, looking as though it simply happened. And that is the entire point, and it is the reason nobody in the rooms above your head will ever think about it for a moment in their lives. Here is the plain truth of it, and it is worth saying without ornament. The skill is real, not skill in the small sense of being handy or careful, but skill of a kind that a man doing the same work in a warehouse or a regiment would be given a title for and a pension at the end of it. You manage a staff of 9. You run an annual budget that would furnish a small business. You buy, you audit, you train, you correct, you forecast. You keep an inventory of several thousand separate items in your head and on paper both. And you do it with such consistency that the people who benefit from it have never once had to notice that it is being done. And the judgment is real, knowing when the fish is not what it was said to be, knowing which girl will steady and which will not, knowing when to speak to the butler and when to let a thing pass and lose nothing by it, knowing exactly how far a mistress can be steered, without ever appearing to have been steered at all. None of that is written down anywhere. None of it was taught to you in a school. You acquired it over 25 years, the way a craftsman acquires a trade. And there is no certificate at the end of it, and no institution behind it, and no name for it except your own. And no account book in this house carries your name. The books are the master's books. The accounts are the master's accounts. The economy is the master's economy. And when he looks over the weekly totals on a Saturday and remarks that the household is run very well, he is not being insincere. He simply believes what he says in a form that has no room in it for a person. The household is run very well. It is not run by anyone. You know what that means at the far end of it, and you have known it for a long time, and you do not let yourself pretend otherwise on the nights when the sum comes out neatly, and you feel pleased. There is no pension. There is no fund, no scheme, no arrangement, nothing that follows you out of the door. When your eyes go, or your legs go, or when a new mistress comes into this house and wants a younger woman with newer ways, you will be given a character, and the character will be excellent, and it will not be worth anything to a household that wants a woman of 35. You have savings in the Bath and West of England Bank. You have a sister in Frome whose husband is civil to you. You have the possibility, which is real and which does happen, and which you have seen happen to 2 women you knew, that a family remembers a long service and keeps a cottage and sends the doctor's bill to the estate. That is not a right. That is kindness. And kindness is not a system. And you have organized your whole life around the difference between those two things, none of which you are thinking about now particularly. It is late, and the fire has gone to a low red, and the house has that settled sound a house makes when everyone in it is asleep except you. You unhook the keys from your waist and lay them on the table beside the candle, and they go down with a sound you have heard every night for 11 years, a soft, heavy chime that stops almost as soon as it starts. You look at them for a moment in the small light. Then you lean forward and you put out the flame, and the house goes quiet all the way down